small. So, thanks for coming. As I said, we're going to try and make this, it may not work out that way, but we're going to try and make it like a little bit of a conversation at the same time that it's a reading. So if you want to say something, I mean, not right in the middle of someone's sentence when they're reading, but in between pieces or something, feel free to unmute yourself and, you know, comment or ask a question or, you know, just to create a diversion. And for the most part, the reader's sound is kind of going to be on, but we'll just see how. It may not happen that way, but it may. So the book is okay. Why when I press speaker, why do I get John Marcus Powell? Maybe I should just leave it on gallery. Okay.
I think you get the last person who made a sound.
Oh, so are you grunting and farting there, John Marcus, that you're always at the top?
Yeah, all the time.
Other than yourself.
I'll try and stop.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to leave it on gallery anyway, because the close-up bugs me. So the book is called, just because it isn't there, just in case it isn't there, Postcards from Elsewhere. Why postcards? Well, even before I acquired the blank book into which many of the details of these short pieces were recorded, I was sketching them out in numerous postcards to friends and acquaintances back home. And thus I owe a great debt of gratitude to my many correspondents for providing me initially with concrete destinations for these reflections on my travel experiences. As the years passed and my trips to Bali continued, there emerged this project of creating a collection of these musings. And yet many of them were still begun as snail mail postcards, subsequently transcribed and modified into my daily journal, and then expanded or contracted at home in New York City, where I used their scribbled details as a memory tool to recreate and preserve moments otherwise ephemeral. I've never been able to keep a journal at home. It's only travel that has elicited any discipline in this regard. Older now, I find it a curious fact that such large blocks of my time at home in the States have slipped away, their details lost, whereas these days spent abroad remain fresh and clear, thanks to my having polished these postcards like gems over and over again for many years. In a profound way, then, they are postcards to myself. I also did not take many photographs for at least the first decade of my travels. I would bring one of those disposable Kodak contraptions, and a few of the photos would survive the vagaries of light and time. But on the whole, the only technique I had of preserving impressions was verbal. This volume begins in the pre-email, pre-digital era, an era of primitive fax machines and overpriced and unreliable long-distance connections. For the first few years, even electricity was a luxury only to be found in town, an hour's walk from home. It may well have been my sense of isolation then that set me to work so diligently, sending forth these postcards that took at least 2 weeks to get where they were going, if they got there at all. My pen became my camera, and no event seemed too minor for a quick, longhand snapshot. Meredith.
Hello. I'm going to read Skin Deep in Jogja. 15 March 1990, Jogja, Java. A whole gallery of beauty salons, their little front windows crowded with portraits of men and women sporting aggressively outdated and imported hairstyles, beehives, pompadours, flips and waves and bobs, sideburns and goatees, all painted directly onto the glass. The shadows within the shops create a smooth, opaque canvas for the numbed skin tones of these faces which gape and leer at passersby. But then I catch them from behind, reflected in the mirrors lining the rear wall of each shallow shop. Backlit now, the sun's glare pockmarks their pale cheeks and singes their jet hair with a leprous chaos of brutally illuminated brushstrokes. Turning a corner, leaving the beauty ghetto behind, I find myself unexpectedly in the coffin quarter. Last year, I saw a man sleeping through the midday heat atop one of the many coffins he'd just planed and sanded. I half expect to see him sleeping there still. I study the rows of fresh coffins. There is no sign of their exhausted, barefoot carpenter. Yet inside me, he has left a single calm brushstroke, smelling of sawdust.
Nemo, I can't help think that you've over the course of your days have had those haircuts.
I've had those what?
Every one of those hairstyles,
Oh.
I think you've probably had.
I don't know. There were a couple I had that I think were not pictured.
Then we have one more selection, brushstrokes. This is from the 19th of June, 1994, Kuta, Bali, for Bill Rice. I see 4 impossibly handsome young brassiere salesmen walking down the road in burning hot sun, stopping with their wares at one little open air shop after another, each one balancing an enormous mountain of snow white brassieres on his shoulder, each one so radiant that I am tempted to stop and buy a few myself, just for the pleasure of watching their dark eyes and white teeth flash from the center of each swift, shy smile. I walk on down the street, turning back a few minutes later for a last glimpse. 4 snow-covered peaks rise up weightless through the distant haze of heat. 4 simple strokes, bright white, in the painting of a master watercolorist drunk with the casual insanity of the whole wide world, caught and cooled at the tip of his brush.
Anybody know who Bill Rice is? No, probably not. Oh well, too complicated to explain.
I hope he loved his painting.
He was a painter, actually. Breakfast at Linda's coffee shop on long layover in Guam. 28 April 1991, Guam. Low and flat and dark, with a corner full of pinball machines decades old and great bowls of fire blaring over the jukebox, its worn wooden paneling has been mellowing for years, its tabletops yellowing beneath too many coffee stains and coats of varnish. The clientele is a strange mixture. Southern Pacific American Legion with a whiff of prostitute and hurricane, their distinctive perfumes lingering, bittersweet gardenia and sea salt, even on this dead calm weekday morning. The waitress wears a brown dress blooming with large, very round, very red roses. And on a stool behind the lunch counter lies a newspaper folded in half.
Turn it off, David.
A little soundtrack for me, David.
That worked.
A little soundtrack.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
That's
I'm muted.
okay.
Muted the mauler. The mauler's muted.
And on a stool behind the lunch counter lies a newspaper folded in half, so that only the huge block letters of its headline are visible. It's upside down, and so it takes me a moment to decipher the words seaweed responsible for second death. And by that time, my eggs have arrived, their yellow raft of rescue afloat on what was once a white plate with coffee in a chipped cup, a refill, the first of many for my jet lag, plunked down within easy reach. That was easily the weirdest place I have ever been in my life long. Completely odd. And covered with cemeteries, like windswept cemeteries of old soldiers.
Wow.
Hey, Adriana.
Oh, wait a minute. Let her get in position.
Oh, God.
Assume the position.
Oh, really?
Yes, you
No.
have to.
Oh, thank you. Oh, my God. Okay.
Hey, Marcia, is this what's known as a cringe-worthy Zoom pause? This is better than the normal one, right?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey. Okay. Low tide. 25th of June, 1994, Kuta, Bali. I might never have reached that point had the tide not been so low, uncovering vast tracts of hard-packed surf, slam, sand, allowing me to skirt the leering faces of the big hotels, which are too busy feigning amusement as they stare out to sea to notice the brief passage of brief little me. Just keep walking. I tell myself, keep walking, keep walking. If one walks long enough, one pops through a wound in the perimeter and finds oneself undeniably elsewhere. It's only that desperate double strand of barbed wire guarding the weed-choked boundaries of the airport that finally stops me in my tracks. Half buried in a sandbank, clustered with wind-splintered, heat-splashed palms, is the rusted hull of a small abandoned aircraft. Two naked children straddle the wreck, riding it like a horse, while a third has crawled inside and is beating the rotting metal as if it were a drum. They don't notice me. They don't feel the need in this desolate realm to keep an eye out for meddlesome strangers. I almost convince myself that the world has ended sometime during my long walk, that the big hotels I passed by hours earlier have already been evacuated, both guests and staff exterminated. But then, on my way home, I passed Father Time himself, a shirtless man carrying an abacus under one impossibly thin arm. He's limping down the street, just like me, exhausted, yet still counting. Thank you.
So believe it or not, I did walk to the boundaries of the Bali airport, and it was like a single strand of barbed wire. That was the boundary of it. I don't know if it's still like that. It probably is now a high security area, unless they had me on camera anyway, but I just couldn't believe it. This elegant rustling of leaves. 9 February 1992, Los Angeles. The Hollywood Central Motel at Highland and Sunset doesn't seem particularly central, although nothing in Los Angeles seems particularly central. Not to mention the creeping liminality of this week of continual departures. which could push even the most persistent nucleus right up to or just beyond the edge into this border zone. Already the list of unrecoverable details is building behind me. Clack, 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 each inch of track lost almost before the locomotive can register its passage. The hellishly boring 6-hour layover in the St. Louis airport. The crazy boy who followed me down dark Divisadero Street after the San Francisco bars closed and offered me meth and acid and then spit at me when I declined, all the while crooning romantic pop tunes in a tenderly homicidal whisper. The old man who had a stroke on the flight from SF to LAX. The curly-haired little girl in El Coyote Mexican restaurant who climbed all over like a chimpanzee and spilled her sticky soda on the vinyl seat cover and stood in it and sat in it twice, while her adult companion totally ignored her and went on devouring his black beans and rice. I'm waiting for a taxi now to take me to yet another airport, another quick stop, crap shop, big top, million-mile hop on out of here. Yet even in this border zone, there is a hidden nucleus right here, right now, at Highland and Sunset, a screen door, and the angle of the late afternoon sun, which is casting screen blurred shadows of leaves stirred by wind onto the whitewashed wall by my motel bed. At last, there is no other sound but that wind in those leaves, and nothing else to look at but their ghostly quivering shadows, coaxing the restless kernel of elsewhere out from the weightless heart of nowhere. A long plane ride to go, yes, 5 or 6 more freeze-dried meals, takeoff, landing, but this elegant rustling of leaves will stay with me now, faithfully, for the next 3 months. So Charlotte, do you know where that motel is? Is it still there? You're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
I do know that intersection very well, but what was the name again? The
It was
hotel?
the Hollywood Central Motel, but it was 1992. You know, it was
Yeah.
pretty cruddy
I mean,
then.
I got here in '89, so maybe I saw it, but I don't recall it. I'm sorry.
Okay, I was looking at your picture, waiting for like the flash of recognition. Oh yes, I know that motel.
Yeah, I know that intersection.
Right.
Nemo,
Yeah.
you think we could just give the number of the page in case we want to follow it?
Yeah, but I can of mine. I have mine written down, but I don't have other people's written down. So you could,
No,
when
if
you
we
read, you could.
ourselves could do it then. See what
Right.
page.
Okay. So Mark, what's your number? And go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mark and my number is 134.
You're looking good for 134.
Thanks. I've got, in the last couple of months, I've had the readers have appeared in my life. So here they are. Yeah, I didn't know which one to read. It was a veritable treat, but England is feeling pretty Bali-esque at the moment. We're in the middle of a heat wave. I'm covered in a thin layer of sweat, so it's quite appropriate. So I went for this one because I like the idea of sitting, doing nothing or virtually nothing, becoming extraordinary. It's a theme that's close to my heart. Hard-boiled eggs of light. At approximately 8 o'clock each morning, the sun breaks through a mist, through a lattice of palm frond and banana leaf. It strikes the surface of the little fish pond alongside my porch, and its rays are then reflected off the water and up onto the porch of my bungalow. You know how light dances and glances off water? How its flicker falls somewhere between the wings of angels and the whirling emanations of a mirrored disco ball. It's the turning point of each morning. And at its signal, I close the book that I've been reading since dawn and stare up at the light play for a quarter of an hour before getting on with the other, more concrete business of the day. I linger longer than usual this morning after discovering that I can alter the rhythm of the dance by throwing sacrificial portions of my breakfast eggs into the illuminated precincts of the pond. The subsequent agitation of that brilliant water, amplified by the feeding frenzy of the goldfish just beneath the surface, is translated immediately into an agitation of reflected light overhead. With my hard-boiled egg-hurling hands still raised in the air, I am the conductor of a luminous orchestra of luminous instruments. I love that.
One of my favorite ones too.
Yeah, me too.
And now here we're going. I'm going to read Going Nowhere. You were just happy to be sitting in the chair going nowhere. So now it's on page 143. Going Nowhere. 10th of April, 1997, Petaluma, Bali. Once again, it's Hari Raya Nyepi, the Balinese New Year, a day of silence and a night of darkness. No traffic on the roads, no traveling out, no work, no lights. All this so that any evil spirits passing over the island will be deceived into believing that there is no mischief to be made here, and so move on to other less ritually fortunate locales. Last night, more drastic measures were taken. At about 8 o'clock, just past dark, 5 men and 1 wide-eyed boy entered the garden, banging pots and cans with cutlery and wielding fragrant burning brooms with which they alternately beat and swept the ground in an effort to drive out any stray demons by fear and force. At the same time, sensing the evening air with thick, sweet smoke. What a lovely emptiness, I felt, as I sat silent in the dark after they'd moved on, the lingering incense perfuming the cloth of my shirt and mingling with the mist rising around the edges of the fish pond alongside my purged porch. And now, all day today, a peace that is like a megaphone for birds and frogs and wind in the leaves and cicadas in the trees and falling drops of rain from thatched eaves and several distant, deafening, collapsing corridors of silver-plated thunder. It is machines that are responsible for most of the music of modern life. And when each and every one of them, from the radio and the television to the blender and the air conditioner, is abruptly switched off, then one can hear a more primal murmur. One can hear earthworms rolling over underground in the mud where coal is born with a low sigh. One can hear the roots of trees chattering in the buried echo chambers where diamonds begin their infinite opera of humming mirrors. When each and every car engine stops, one can hear from half a mile away, without having to drive there, the beating of the wings of a single bird. Startling sound. Even the giant spider webs strung up between banana palms will sing when gilded by sunlight like the nervous systems of harps. But only, of course, after men and women turn off all their kitchen appliances, all beaters and juicers and slicers and graters and tick-tocking timers, and plunk themselves down in their creaking chairs to listen to their hair grow and gray and then fall out. Ants carry the fallen hairs away almost immediately, tap dancing in a long parade to the music of rapid eye blinks. Today, I am going nowhere.
Great.
So we are at Wendy, yeah?
Yeah, thanks, Nemo. So yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Wendy. I wanted to say, Meredith, I love your raven.
I know, that is great.
Isn't that
Thank you.
marvelous? And yeah, I'm just a huge fan of Nemo. Nemo was my first publisher. He some years ago reached out to me and said, I'd love to publish your chapbook. And I had just had a book deal fall through, and it just felt like an angel had landed on my doorstep. I also find Nemo eminently quotable. I quote him in my upcoming book. And it's a quote I don't have with me. It's kind of long, but it always gets a raised eyebrow, and then people have to think about it. And this is how I always think of Nemo. He's always kind of striking that funny bone where you have to think twice about what he's just said. So I am delighted to be here. And what I have chosen to read today is called The Arts of Prayer. And it's from March of 1993 in Petula, Bali.
Petaloo.
Petaloo, I knew that. B interrupts me this afternoon with a tall tale about a tiny praying mantis.
I'm looking for my earbuds. So very good.
I see him. You're making noise. That's it. Okay.
We're good. B interrupts me this afternoon with a tall tale about a tiny praying mantis. I am reading St. John of the Cross, marveling at his beautiful step-by-step ascent to God, yet wary at the same time of his terrifying aspiration toward total mystical union. Sitting here peacefully in the garden, this burning desire to overcome nature in order to attain a divine union outside its bonds seems almost blasphemous, unbalanced, disrespectful to that quietly reflective knowledge gained in and through the created world. The saint turns so completely away that I sense an act of hubris, a dangerous presumption which might result in a rechristening, as if I were suddenly reading the journals, not of St. John of the Cross, but of St. Frankenstein of the castle. It's not that I don't relate to the aesthetic passion. I too feel a frustration as I grow older and more disillusioned, a frustration with things as they are, an inability to satisfy the yearnings of soul, a desire to leap beyond sense towards something more intoxicatingly real and perfect and poetic. Love of God, insatiable ego, artist's vocation, or just another hard-on or alcoholic relapse. Of course, there are days when I just hate everybody and everything, days when I wish it would all just go away. But I hardly think it advisable to base a theology on such sentiments as those, though I'm sure it's been done. And then B arrives and brings me back to the present garden, far from either monastic cell or madman's castle. I was looking down at my hand, he said, not thinking about anything in particular. That alone sounds lovely. It was just a speck, a spot. I thought maybe it was an ant, but it wasn't. It was a baby praying mantis. resting in perfect stillness on the back of his hand, infinitesimal, flawless in the complexity of its form, and yet almost transparent, almost invisible to the naked eye. B doesn't stay long, just long enough for a bit of playful exaggeration, chatting on about flea circuses and trained crickets and the outrageous possibilities given what he claims to be the superior intelligence and grace of the praying mantis. Minutes later, he roars off on his motorcycle, and I am left here with my holy mountain of books and thoughts, doggedly climbing up and on toward mystical union with my own hopeful hand. Thanks.
Yay.
Nemo.
Yeah.
I was talking about you, not to you.
Oh. Was there more to this? Was there more to the sentence?
No, I was just to say that Nemo has been part of my life for a long time. He's a publisher, poet, silk salesman, and a treasured friend. And this is his postcard from Petaloo in Bali from the 23rd of March, 1993. It's on page 64, and it's called Marmalade. Isn't that a wonderful word? This morning, the word marmalade bounces through the garden, over the hedge and up the tiled steps of my porch, at least a dozen times. In the bungalow next to mine, a retired British school teacher, come to Bali for an unprecedented experience, finds his first breakfast without marmalade in 40 or 50 years, just a bit more of an adventure than he'd bargained for. Apparently, he's convinced that if he just repeats the word out loud, louder and louder, he can somehow conjure the sweet, sticky stuff of comfortable routine. I eye my own cup of black coffee with suspicion. My favourite part of each day is the dark hour before dawn, before anyone else is awake, when I can convince myself that nothing really exists at all, beyond a few lingering crickets and a slight breeze. Daybreak brings back details. Yes, names, dates, burnt toast, missing marmalade. And yes, I do enjoy the complexity of a fine piece of embroidery as much as the next fellow. Yet it is one of the indescribable delights of a quiet life to stare at a few simple nouns and forget about all the adjectives for a while.
You know, Annie, I think that you could read a cereal box and it would sound like a masterpiece.
That's the secret of my success as a poet. Don't tell everybody.
Oh, so you got it all off cereal boxes, did you?
Yep.
So I'd like to conduct, at the risk of making this total chaos here, a little experiment here. I would like everyone to turn their video off for the next one, so that we're just, I mean, it's sort of like closing your eyes, but it's like digitally closing your eyes, so that
How do you do that?
it's down in the bottom
Oh, I see.
left corner, stop video.
Gotcha.
And then what do we do?
Then you just listen.
Oh, we just listen. All right.
But the whole world will be dark.
Bye.
Hi. Are we all off?
It's the hour before dawn.
Yes.
Shall we shut our eyes as well?
You can, but I mean, this is enough of a gesture. You can't see me, so. This is on page 156. But if your eyes are closed, you can't see that either. next to a blue rubber band and a lizard's turd. 6 November 1997, Petaloo, Bali. Shopping, sweating, hauling, sweating, unpacking, sweating, repacking, sweating, counting, sweating, sweating. Stop. What do I see? My laundry steaming in the sunlit garden. The broken eggshells of my breakfast littering the marble tabletop. A few coarse grains of spilled salt on the porch tiles next to a blue rubber band and a lizard's turd. A plastic bottle of soy sauce with a little magic ring of mold around the tip. 7 ripe mangosteens. A single Cambogia blossom fallen to the ground, its bright white petals darkening to deep lemon in the center where the sex is. A loom of light weaving on a crosshatch of coconut palms. My left foot glowing in a stripe of direct sun. A couple of passing clouds, larger than I am. Okay, you can come back now. That wasn't too complicated. That was good though. It was kind of different, because I'm looking at everybody's face the whole time, so it's a little bit, it can distract one a little bit.
Good thing I didn't go off to the bathroom or anything.
Well, I figure a few people might have slipped away completely, like took a, you know, an excuse. So where are we? Marcia.
The relevant sacrifice, I'm sorry. The relevant sacrament, 14 May 1995, Bali. Another stray dog collapsed in public on the final threshold, pressed flat on its stomach, body skeletal, chin resting in its own clear vomit, which leaks weakly from its mouth, draining away with what is left of its life. What exactly is it that is demanded at such a moment of the practitioner of compassion? What external or internal gesture, a pat on the head, a tidbit of food, a brief burst of indignation at callous passersby? These would seem to be clearly beside the point and much too far after the fact. Acknowledgement of the fact. That would appear to be the only relevant sacrament remaining. The inner voice that says, ah, yes, this is it. This is the moment of death. The moment, as William James put it, in which every individual existence goes out in a lonely spasm of helpless agony. He goes on. If you protest, my friend, wait till you arrive there yourself. And so I nod my brief and sober farewell to Sam Beckett's dying dog and carry on forward, tolling toward my own faithful and final threshold, every man's best friend.
Wow. Thank you,
I'll
Marcia.
tell the writer you said that.
No, I was wowing the reader. So Wendy, you don't want to read that Swift Hummingbirds one, right?
I think I'll just do the one.
Okay, that's fine. And then so it's Mary's up now.
So happy to see all your faces, especially the more reclusive ones among you, like Matt and John and Andrew. It's great to see all your faces. Jim. Anyhow, yeah, and Nemo was an angel for me too, publishing my first chapbook, The Countess of Flatbroke. So thank you, Nemo. This is called, on page 174, Dangling in the Water, 26 February 1999, Petala Ballad. Sitting with my feet dangling in the abandoned swimming pool, examining all the little leaves and drowned insects floating on the surface, I spy what appears to be a tiny piece of jewelry or a sparkling button, and I scoop it out, only to have it sprout sudden legs and cling to my finger when I try to deposit it on wet blue tiles. It is an insect, but it looks like a gem, its wings drenched almost to transparency, yet crossed with faint golden hieroglyphs that catch fire in the sun. For a few moments, it crawls about, opening and closing its wings in order to dry them. Then it vanishes like a lost golden earring, longing to regain its anonymity. I turn my attention back to the water, this time rescuing a tiny spider that has sought refuge on a raft of 3 fortuitously converging mango leaves. A moment later, an orchid trailing a lace of green tentacles slips from the mossy groin of an otherwise barren branch of frangipani and plummets to the ground. An old woman arrives then to lay her daily offering at the threshold of the tiny temple nearby, followed ever so quickly and quietly by a cat who scales the stone steps of the shrine to gobble up the sacred grains of boiled rice from the very lap of God. All this I observe lightheadedly in the glaring sun, dripping sweat, before the afternoon thunderheads already massing in the north begin to roll in and the wind begins to rise. It isn't until I get back to my room that I realize that my key is lost, that it must have fallen from the pocket of my shorts while I was swimming in the deep end of the deserted pool. So much music in that, just unbelievable, really.
So many bugs. On page 186. Beast or poet? 13th of February, 2000, Petaloo, Bali. The cat that has toppled the garbage bin overnight now passes silently by the porch without even looking at me. Were I to make the slightest noise or movement, she'd dart away instantly and vanish into the pre-dawn darkness of the garden beyond the reach of my weak porch light. But I write without a sound, and she glides likewise silently on by. It is only at an hour like this one, all alone and a foreigner, before day breaks and cock crows, that I recover the perfect indolence that can make of man a beast or a poet. Rick.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Nemo, and congratulations. Nemo published my first chapbook and republished my first book. So, you know, why all this talk of angels? Because Nemo is an angel. As a matter of fact, my friend Paul Weingarten, who Nemo knows, is a very good painter, read Nemo's first book, and his response to me was, he's an angel.
Mm.
So there was like a guy who he didn't publish who says Nemo's an angel.
Right, so it's not.
I don't think he published anything. Well, the one I'm going to read, I chose because it really chose me. It's one of the pieces in which our traveler takes up the question of falling apart, and really gets in this case, really gets into the sort of the domino effect of decrepitude. It's got drinking alone, being followed by vicious dogs at night. It's really got everything. Writer's Grasp, 24 April 1992, Katu, Bali. It's difficult to write this because my hand is ill. I've damaged my wrist somehow doing push-ups, perhaps tumbling through surf. Or maybe I'm simply writing too much, curing block with cramp, treating one malady with the next malady and the next, evolving toward more total collapse. Last night I got drunk. I went to a beachfront disco early before they cleared the tables away for dancing tourists and wannabe decadent locals. The place was almost deserted. I drank my slow, cold beers and watched 4 vertical rows of yellow lantern light gaining length and strength as darkness fell. The chatter of a few diners teased my ear like a human wind chime in the background of light and shadow. Slightly dizzy, I walked home along the beach, threatened by barking dogs and the roar of nearly invisible surf. I had no hangover this morning, just this ache in my hand. Perhaps I was holding my beer bottle too tightly as I gripped this pen.
Mm. Wow.
It was like you were there.
Kuta is a weird place. Kuta is like the beach tourist trap. Petaloo, where I am in Petaloo, it's up in the mountains and it's like remote and it's really quiet. But the beach is really gorgeous in Kuta, so I used to go there. But it's just an insane. I don't know what it's like now. It's probably nothing now because of COVID, but it was just like more insane than anything you could imagine. It's like, and people, tourists feel like they have special license in those third countries, so they really act up in an unpleasant way. But now we're going back up to the mountains. Page 179. Dead and Broken. 7th of March, 1999, Batu Bulan, Bali. On the way, we pass a man and his young sons splashing around in the roadside gutter, disemboweling a huge hog that lies on its back, 4 feet poking at the sun, gut slit to the sky. The father is reaching in to remove long strings and gobs of viscera, depositing them in a steaming heap, which his children gather round laughing. The pig is far larger than any of his sons. That's all I see, for the whole scene is left behind in an instant by the speeding motor beneath us and the road that slips constantly away. Not long afterwards, the traffic slows to a standstill. An accident, of course. As we cautiously approach, Wyan stiffens. Mati, he whispers hoarsely in my ear. Dead. As he steers the motorbike into a patch of weeds at the side of the road, we see that a crowd has gathered around the body of what seems no more than a boy. They are covering his face with a white cloth and rolling him up in a stained bamboo mat. Wyan asks me for a few rupiah. then instructs me to wait for a moment while he strides through the crowd to add them to the pile of coins that already lies beside the crudely mummified body. As he moves forward, offering in hand, two small boys run backward from the corpse, playfully, as from a wave on the shore of death. Pausing alongside me, the elder of the two pantomimes the split head and smashed nose of the victim, both boys giggling gruesomely as they scamper off a moment later. On our way, once again, driving very slowly now, for the Balinese always drive very slowly for at least a few minutes after witnessing an accident, Wyan casts a worried glance over his shoulder, which I can't help but misinterpret. Sidi, I ask him. Sad? Flat, is his only reply, as he pulls over yet again and dismounts to inspect our rear tire, punctured perhaps by a piece of the broken glass that littered the scene of the accident. The noon sun makes the walk seem longer, but it really only takes about 15 or 20 minutes to reach the Benkel in the nearest village, where we have the tube replaced for 18,000 rupiah. Eyeing the sweat rolling down my brow, the mechanic throws in a couple of cold drinks for free, for pity's sake. So we are at John Marcus. Are you ready? Beautiful.
Yes. Almost. Let me put it on to view again. Okay. Right. Just to say that that Nemo is my close friend, and that he's published 2 volumes of poetry of mine, and that in the summer he's going to publish a long narrative poem, which is something I've never attempted before.
Maybe in the fall.
In the fall, okay. Well, anyway, there it is, and I'm scared to death about it. I'm going to read one on page 59. It's called, "But Why This Talk of Drowning?" And I wanted to read it because, as much as any other, it's sort of, I think it's absurd. It's an absurdist poem. And that's one of the things I like about Nemo's work. It's page 59, "But Why This Talk of Drowning?" On my last day in Amsterdam, Vermeer's woman in blue refuses so calmly to look at me that I stand before her for over an hour, unable to write the lines of the letter she is reading. I wonder, after she raises her eyes at last and lays her letter aside, whether she too will feel this desire to walk and go on walking, despite the chill in the air and the still cold water of the narrow canals, too black to reflect the stormy sky. It's suicide water, I remember whispering calmly to myself. Its chill will numb anyone who plunges into it. Its darkness will soon swallow and hide and forget one. But why this talk of drowning, of numbness, of invisibility? The solitude of the journey, the blue of Vermeer, the letter whose contents remain forever unknown, unwritten, unread. At the point of embarkation, all that remains unsaid can thrill one to the breaking point.
Why, thank you, John Marcus. Page 193. They too will have fevers. 22 February 2000, Petaloo, Bali. Less than 2 weeks in, and already I've been infiltrated by whatever it is that worms its way into the intestines here in paradise. I should have been warned off by the cesspool of mud-slimed trash at the threshold of the village quack's office, but I went through the useless motions of pill and payment anyway. Today, I will take a more direct approach. Over the years, the local pharmacist's trial and error have proved a good gamble, and I've scribbled a list of symptoms and medications on the inside cover of this journal that may help to narrow the odds. I'll enter the shop unshowered, with a ton of wet bread in my head, with my teeth tartared and my gut treed by its own baying hounds. I'll take cool comfort in the white coat of the woman in attendance. I'll ante up, laying my coin down on the cracked glass counter as she humbly spins the wheel, while her children play outside, naked but for the dust they are sitting in. I can see them through the shop's back door, left ajar. They too will have fevers. She may know what to do. You can get any drug there in existence just by going to the pharmacy, which is supposed to be why antibiotics aren't going to work anymore, but she knew more than the doctors did. Alan.
Hi.
Hey.
Oops. I should mute though.
It's almost over.
I love you. I love your sense of wit and irony.
So, John.
Hi.
Reclusive John Riley.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. I get to come out of my closet. Okay. I'm reading 138 Net Profit. And I think it's the only one where I've had to read epigraphs part. Even a life full of holes, a life of nothing but waiting, is better than no life at all. And I think this is Dries bin Hamed Shahade. Did I say that right?
Moroccan guy.
31 March 97. How do you say it? Batut?
Petaloo.
Yeah. A late afternoon cloud slipped slowly over the baked blue of the sky, and all the brilliant ladders of light cast onto bed sheets through palm fronds and half-shuttered windows have vanished in one moment. They've melted and ceased climbing. Another moment, and the clouds will pass. The ladders of light will return. But this time, perhaps, with a bit of breeze as well, shaking the palms, tearing the glowing pattern they paint, till this more ragged rise and fall, as of shredded fishnets, hauls in its weightless catch of bright nothing once again. So another afternoon leaks silently through tattered threads, leaving little behind but time. Time to sleep beneath a sky filled with pinpricks of stars, which leak light as well, yet a light more distant, a veteran light, a light already conversant with the end not of one day, but of all days. It's a life full of holes, as the Moroccan storyteller puts it, full of exquisite emptiness, lighter and lighter. That lone adjective, exquisite, being the very last thing it can hold, the life's net's ultimate cargo, the last of the luminous to drain away through the loosened weave.
So Exotic Books will be publishing a book of John's as soon as I get my act together. He has these great 100-word poems, so we're going to publish 100 of them sometime by the end of the year, I'd say. Okay, I'm going to close with 2 pieces. First one's on 218. So this worked well, this, unrigid format with the conversation. I think this I didn't know if it was going to be a disaster or everybody would be completely silent. No one would say a word and I'd just be waiting. But it seemed like seems like a good format, because these Zoom things are often incredibly stuffy.
I must say, one thing I noticed, I wrote a little review of this and tried to post it on Amazon, and apparently Amazon won't let you post reviews anymore unless you wrote the book. But
Yeah.
the pieces that I chose out of the book to highlight in their review are all ones that's been read here that people wanted to read. So I think that's interesting. I think there's a lot of charming pieces and
Yeah.
a lot of good ones to choose from.
Cool. Blue. 2nd of April, 2001, Batu Bulan, Bali. It's the wrong time of day to be driving home on a motorbike. The roads are congested with belching flatbed trucks crawling beneath their heavy loads, mostly timber and massive blocks of limestone. And I am learning the hard way that these are the designated hours to which the trafficking of such cargo is restricted. Yet there are other lighter loads as well. Traveling directly in front of me for about 20 minutes of relentless stop and go is an open pickup piled high with freshly picked hydrangea blossoms. Its bright, warm alp of blue-violet dominating the landscape ahead. It begins to rain, and the driver of the pickup pulls over and hurries, barefoot and shirtless, from the cab of his truck to toss a blue plastic tarp over his load of flowers to protect them, not so much from the rain as from the rapidly rising wind, which is gusting now and sending the blue panicles bouncing and rolling down the highway between vehicles. With traffic at a standstill once again, I watched the truck struggling to re-enter the queue, this time behind me, revealing as its blue mountain moves at last, a young boy beyond it. A serious young boy, trying to cross the road in the driving rain. The light blue of his school uniform soaked and deepened at sleeves and ankles, despite the broad blue umbrella he grips with such determination. And just as a little coda here, I'm going to read a really early one from 1992. Heaven and Earth, 18th of February, 1992, Andong, Bali. This was in the pre-electricity days. This was really far away and long ago. A bright red dragonfly lands on my knee while I am sitting in the hot sun reading about drawing down the influences of the stars and the planets via talismans, employing appropriate colors and shapes and sounds and the music of perfumes to lure heaven to earth. I look up, closing the book in my lap. A divine afternoon on the whole. 2 yellow kittens, twin sons, are following a woman in a snow-white brassiere. The 3 of them walking quickly in a line on a path on this windy day, while a child calls out in a very foreign tongue somewhere behind them. Heaven on this earth does pass so quickly. A moment. Then the anchor is hauled, and the green palms waving on the horizon with the regularity of oarsmen propel the whole passionate boat of earth away into a sea of sky so vast no incantation can reach there. Thank you, really a lot. Why don't everybody should just unmute themselves and we can devolve to chaos.
Thank you, Nemo.
That was brilliant. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Nemo.
It was
great.
nice
It
to
was
meet all of you.
beautiful one
I
to
had
end
never
on.
seen any of you.
Yeah, I know.
Jude.
Mhm.
Thank you, Nemo.
You're welcome. How are you?
I
Are you
love
in
them, Nemo.
Serbia or wherever you are, Mary Jane?
Yes, I'm in Belgrade.
Whoa.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, Mary Jane is the composer that
Oh, yeah.
dressed to Julius Eastman's
Yep.
work, and
I
that
remember.
we often find ourselves in little like conversations with various
Yeah,
people who
I've
don't know anything about him.
I've been on Zoom calls with Nemo before in a totally different context.
Yes, we've been.
where we're being accused of being racist and
Well, I
you know
was
all
on that.
kinds
I
of
think I was
lovely
there,
things.
wasn't I? Yeah.
Pardon?
I think I was on that call. One of them where Nemo was being accused of being a racist.
Did you go? Were you there? Oh,
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was there. Mary was there as
Is there
well. I
like a
believe.
recording or something? That sounds awesome.
the what?
Sounds awesome. You got a recording of that?
Yes, we did record the whole thing. Julio recorded it.
Oh, God.
Are you still recording, Julio? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So